Most of us try to convince ourselves that if we can simply ignore certain thoughts and feelings, that they will magically disappear. We think that if we can just somehow push these negative emotions or these impulses down deep enough and far enough, that somehow with time they're just going to kind of go away. But the truth is that it almost never happens that way. In fact, they tend to silently build and get even stronger to the point where they start coming out in ways that we cannot even control. And when this happens, it can feel genuinely confusing because it seems so out of character. But in reality, we're often just echoing the frustrations of a part of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. I'm sure we can all think of a time when we snapped at someone over something totally insignificant, or tried to hold in our resentment and act like everything is fine, only to overreact later on to the wrong person completely. Or maybe we just try to convince everyone, including ourselves, that everything is great and that there's nothing wrong, yet we always have this constant low-level pressure and anxiety and anger that we really can't pinpoint. Believe it or not, all of this can be a direct result of the things that we've tried to repress and set aside. Carl Jung, one of the most influential figures in all of psychology, had a specific term for this. He called it our shadow. He believed that every single person has a hidden side, a collection of the traits and impulses and desires that we find unacceptable. And because we, of course, want to be able to see ourselves as good and competent, we usually just kind of pretend that these parts of ourselves do not even exist. But as he famously said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is something that I have found to be 100% true, and it really is the core of the challenge. And we may not even realize it's happening, but it can show up as things like overreactions, irrational irritation, passive-aggressive behavior, or just constant patterns of repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And unfortunately, the less aware we are of all of this, the more control it has over us. These things will simply decide for themselves when they choose to show up. So how do we change this? Well, the first thing we can do is to start to recognize this process in ourselves in real time. We need to pay more attention when something triggers us more than it should, or we start running into the same type of conflict with different people. If we start seeing this repetition of the exact same themes, it is probably not random. I think we completely underestimate how much self-honesty can lead to change. It can be extremely painful sometimes, which is why we tend to avoid it, but there really isn't any kind of path forward without this type of self-awareness. And when we are successful in this and we do notice these kind of negative feelings come up, we don't just want to stop there. We want to go beyond that and actually sit with these feelings for a while without judgment. We have to start to understand that just because we've been pushing away these parts of ourselves, it does not necessarily mean that they are wrong or bad. In fact, most of the time, they are trying to tell us something that we desperately need to hear. When we slow down enough to actually listen, we often realize that underneath the irritation or the defensiveness or even the shame, that there's often something even more vulnerable there. Maybe an insecurity or a fear of rejection, or even just a general feeling like we are not enough for some reason. And these are not things that need to be suppressed or eliminated. These are things that truly need to be understood. And this is why I tend to believe that the idea of the shadow is a lot less about the dark and negative and a lot more about something that is simply incomplete. I think we've been conditioned to believe that our shadow is the worst parts of us, but I think a more accurate description is really just the unacknowledged parts of us. And sometimes this can even include strengths that we're trying to hide, like assertiveness or ambition or emotional sensitivity, because at some point we were made to feel like society does not deem these to be acceptable traits. So the goal here isn't to attempt to fix ourselves by trying to cut pieces of ourselves away. It's to become more whole by bringing awareness to all of these pieces. One practical way to start doing this is to gently question our reactions in a non-critical way. So, for example, when something feels disproportionately intense, instead of immediately acting on it or trying to push it away, we can ask ourselves, what is this really about? Why does this bother me so much? What might this be pointing to? And while it is essential that we are honest here, we also have to remember to be kind to ourselves, because if we just immediately jump to harsh judgments, all we're doing is simply recreating the same conditions that caused these parts to go underground in the first place. Remember, the point is not to try to shame ourselves into awareness, it's to understand ourselves into it. And the more we do this, the more truth we're going to uncover, and it becomes easier and easier to recognize these patterns before they fully play out, because we are finally acknowledging and validating these emotions and experiences. And instead of always feeling like our reactions are just kind of happening to us, we start to gain the ability to actually choose how we respond. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that we're never going to overreact or fall into old habits again. That is unfortunately part of being a human being sometimes. But the difference is that we won't be as disconnected from what's actually driving those moments. And that alone changes everything, because again, it really is awareness that creates the possibility for change. And in the end, this process really has a lot less to do with trying to become a different person, and a lot more to do with being actually honest with the person you already are. And that, of course, doesn't mean that we can't try to work on these aspects of ourselves. If that is something that we truly desire to do, we can absolutely do that. But we're never going to actually get anywhere if we keep fighting with these aspects of ourselves or trying to pretend that they don't even exist. Remember, our shadow is not our enemy. It's a part of us that developed for a reason. If we can start listening to it instead of ignoring it, not only will it stop trying to control us from the background, but it will actually start contributing to a more honest, integrated, and whole version of the person that we truly are. So as always, I really hope this video was helpful. These were definitely words that I needed to be reminded of. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.